Peace, love, and Reiki, and welcome to this episode of Global Reiki Webinars. My name is Rachel Goldberg. I am your host for this experience, and in the box beside me, you see a photo of Phyllis Furumoto, who is Usui Shikiryoho lineage bearer, and she will be talking with us today about living the precepts and Reiki as a way of life. We've received a number of questions in advance that I'm really excited to hear Phyllis talk with us about. And I'm just checking the chat for the first time. It's awesome. I don't see any comments that you guys don't hear me. So that's fantastic. And I'm just going to say hello to some of you. Thanks for being here. It's really a lot more fun for us with you here. So hello, Mark, Sharad in France, Val in England, Judy in Colorado, Raven in Washington State. Hello to Meryl in Maryland. Hello to someone in Moscow. Hi, Rebecca in Hague and Boris in Almaty, Kazakhstan. Hello to Ajit Dev Kaur in Chile. So exciting to be here. If this is your first time experiencing Global Reiki Webinars, it is a project that Phyllis and I have been in for about 2.5 years, which is just an opportunity for the global Reiki community to engage in conversation with each other and engage in conversation with Phyllis and receive teachings and insight from her decades of experience traveling and being in service to the global Reiki community. So I am really excited for today's webinar and topic, particularly because when I came to Reiki, precepts were not something that was included in my Reiki 1. And I believe my teacher now does include it. And it's something that I've come across in literature and also have come across the concepts of what I think of when I read the words in the Reiki precepts, which we'll share in a moment, are similar to ideas that I've come across in other spiritual traditions that have been part of my life. And I'm really, really excited to receive some direct teachings of this aspect of Reiki tradition from Phyllis. So a couple little announcements before we begin. One is that we have a Facebook group called Global Reiki Webinars. And if you're not a member, that's one of the first places where you get information whenever these events are happening live. You can register and be with us and submit your questions in advance, as well as any questions that you have or thoughts in your own Reiki practice or response to anything you hear Phyllis or myself say on one of these webinars. We want to be in conversation with you. So please join the Facebook group, Global Reiki Webinars, and join the conversation there. The other bit of business is that we do accept monetary donations. This project is a labor of love by Phyllis and myself, and your gifts to us feel your love, allow us to continue doing this in a way that feels really balanced and full and allows us to cover our expenses as well. So I'm going to post a link for those of you who are here live. It'll show up in your chat. And if you click the button, it'll open a different window. So you don't need to leave the webinar or anything. And all gifts are appreciated by us very deeply. And if you're watching the replay on YouTube, there will be a link in the description below. Will be up in just a moment. And the final thing is, if you stick around till the end, we'll have some additional announcements about opportunities for you to engage more directly in global community, including online meet and greets, in-person gatherings, other events that we are doing. So looking forward to sharing that with you on the other side of this webinar. And without further ado, I will mute myself and turn it over to Phyllis.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I wanted to say good morning, but it may not be morning in your place. It is for me. And I just want to invite you to join Rachel and I in some Reiki. And we'll close our eyes and put our hands on ourselves, or whatever your practice holds. And just, I like going to a special place in my mind. Since I'm a mountain girl, I like imagining being up in the hills in Colorado and in a big mountain meadow with the Colorado blue sky above us. And this huge circle of people from all parts of the globe being able to join hands. We can't feel the warmth of each other's hands, but we can feel the warmth of each other's Reiki. Flowing, the energy flowing around the circle. Filling the circle. Thank you. Let's come back from our mountain meadow or wherever you were. Wonderful to feel a part of you. I want to tell you a little story. When I was 30, I was celebrating actually up on a mountain meadow like the one I was just in. And we went up there in the afternoon and took a couple of kegs of beer. Those were the days. And started a bonfire. And I used to call these white men fires because we would gather from the edge of the meadow what we call deadfall, the little trees that had fallen down, and they're about this big around, you know, at the thickest end. We would drag them into this fire and put all the tops of the trees together. So it was all these little baby branches, and that was our kindling. And then we would start the fire, and as the fire burned, we'd just go around and push these trees further and further into the fire. And well, sometime 12 hours later, something in the really dark of night, I went out into this meadow and looked up at the sky and heard these words of my father in my ear, like saying, "What are you going to do with your life?" That was his favorite question at the time. I was 30, turning 30, and I realized in that moment that I didn't think I was going to live to be 30. You know, this is in the days of the Cold War, and when I grew up in school, every week we had an atomic bomb, you know, nuclear attack drill where we would run down to the basement thinking that was going to help us. I mean, I have no idea if that was real or not. And my mother stored cases and cases of canned grapefruit, ugh, in case we had to survive in the basement, and she didn't want us to get scurvy. So these are some of my childhood memories. So when I was standing in this meadow, I thought, gosh, if I'm 30, I could live to be 60. And if I live to be 60, I've got to do something else besides downhill ski. I mean, that's what my life was at the time. So I thought to myself, what could I do that could help me in my life and help other people? Like, I really wanted to be a therapist, but I worked in a residential mental hospital, and they would diagnose people, and then that was the early days of psychotropic drugs. So then they got drugs, and that was supposed to be more humane than electroshock treatments, but it wasn't actually in some cases. And was a very interesting time, really. And so I couldn't think of any job that I could have that would do what I wanted to do in my life. So I thought, that's why I'm skiing. So I went back to the fire, joined my friends, kind of forgot about it actually for a while. And then my mother called me a couple of months later and said, your grandmother is going on this trip in the summer, and you're going with her because she needs somebody to travel with her. And I said, well, nice for you to say, but I do have a job. I felt very defensive about my little job in the ski area. And she said, you have to go. So it took me about 4 months to figure out that she was right, as usual. So we end up the first time in Puerto Rico. And, Puerto Rico is a laid-back community, especially in 1979. And we would wait often for this person who was supposed to pick us up to go to a lecture or a class or something. And I would be outside the hotel pacing, and thinking, I should just rent a car. Then we would be on time. And, I wouldn't have to worry about this, because part of my job with her, I felt, was to get her to her talk on time. And then the car would pull up, we would get in, she would be very pleasant. But while I was pacing, she would say to me, just for today, do not worry. And I would think, well, easy for you to say. Or she would say, just for today, do not anger. And I would think, right, easy for you to say. I'm responsible. You're just hanging out, waiting to be picked up. So that was my first introduction to the precepts. And then when she started talking and in these lectures about Reiki and about the precepts and about the life that she led with Reiki, it was really hard for me to believe. It was like I knew she wasn't lying, and I knew that if these stories were true, or they were, a part of her life, but they were unbelievable to me. Like, I just had no space for them. So then I found myself in 1980, after she died in December, thinking, what am I going to do? I'm committed myself to Reiki, and her voice popped into my head, just for today, do not worry. And I went, even if you're not embodied, I still hear your voice, which is true even today. And these precepts for me have accompanied me all these 40 years. And, in the 1990s, refrigerator magnets became, a big fad. So, of course, we put the precepts on refrigerator magnets, hung them on our refrigerators, and they're very pretty. And at that point, I realized that if we memorize the precepts, like try to memorize them, then they become a part of our habitual automatic behavior. And I told my students, I don't really want you to do this. I want you to have the precepts somewhere in your house that you can read when, and that I don't want you to just memorize them and then think that you will just have them in your life. So I was half right. When I was in Japan this last 3 months, I talked to Yakuten-san, Yakuten Inamoto, my now dear friend, and I said, you know, if we memorize them and then they just go into our subconscious somewhere, do you think they're doing any kind of work? And he said, well, of course. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, you know, there are Buddhist practices that they don't memorize, but it becomes a part of them. And so maybe what you're saying is a kind of mental idea, but I got from what he was saying that there's a place in which if you recite the precepts in Japanese, for instance, and you don't know what you're saying, it still makes a difference. And I wanted to say, well, if we recite them in English, it doesn't sound as wonderful as if they're in Japanese. So are they still doing something? And he said, of course. So it was a great lesson for me to understand that our bodies and our beings in this practice work on many different levels. Conscious, like I had the story that this student, first degree student, who was actually taking the class at the time, she was really disturbed by her kids when they came home from school, because she was an artist, and it was a kind of rule in their house that if her door was closed to her studio, they couldn't knock on the door and disturb her. But they always did when they came back from school, because of course they wanted to see her. And so one day, as she was very irritated, she whipped open the refrigerator door to get them something to eat after school. And this piece of paper fell on the floor, and it was the precepts that she had written down. And there was this precept, just for today, do not anger. And it kind of leapt out of the page into her eyes. And she thought, okay, there's something that can be done about this. So she and her kids sat down, they made this agreement about how they would come home from school, and that she really needed to have her space that she was creating. It wasn't like she was hiding from them, which is what they thought. So after having this talk, they came to this agreement, and it changed the whole family's life. You can imagine. So that's some of the stories about the precepts that I hold. And I see that over the 40 years, even though I thought in 1980 that this will never really make a difference in my life, it's made a huge difference. And I can't tell you exactly pivotal moments when things have happened that I've turned around. But in living with them, it has allowed me to see that there are moments that little step by little step changes the response I have, allows me to take time to have compassion. And that the questions that I have, like, well, how can I not be angry right now? are great questions for us to grow with. And that's the purpose of the precepts. When I first heard them, of course, I took them in as in my Christian training as kind of 10 commandments, but now I have 5 more that I have to obey. And I didn't like that. And I had a lot of resistance to them. But as I began to teach Reiki and to teach the precepts, which was very difficult for me in the beginning, I realized that they weren't really commandments, and that actually, after a few years, I realized they were like reminders in the moment. Like, if I have a question about something in my life, there's one of the precepts applies to it. And so it became an interesting practice to take a moment where I was confused and upset and wanting to have the right answer, and to take it back to the precepts and say, which one applies? And that was also very good. So these are just a few of the ways that I've used the precepts in my life in Reiki. And it has allowed me not only to be unconscious about the changes or to just accept the changes as they come, but to actually choose the changes, which is very important to choose. So I would love to start the questions. And I know that I love the questions that you had as usual. They're great. And we'll see where we get to in our questioning. Rachel?
Did we want to also share the precepts, that slide that we created for people to actually see the language?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay, great. All right.
You're kind of frozen.
I'm hearing some.
Oh,
okay. Okay. So I am going to go ahead and read the first question.
Yeah, good.
Okay. It looks like there are some questions that came in on the chat also, that we can perhaps take a look at a little later. But the first question that was submitted in advance was from, it looks like Kathy, but I think it's actually Kaithe.
I think
Phyllis, do you know this person?
I think it's actually Katja, and it's in another language.
Katja.
Does that make sense, Katja?
Okay.
That's what I read in my...
Yes, Katja.
Yeah.
Okay. So Katja, thank you for submitting your question. And Katja wrote, do you believe the multitude of translations influences the intentions of their use? Do you feel that the precept should be utilized within treatments? If yes, how so?
Aha. Great question, Katja. Okay, now we'll have the slide.
Okay.
I just wanted to see you when you read the question, that's all. Okay, Katja, this is a great question. Oh, now you get to see my whole wall. So on the left, on your left, I hope your left is the same as my left, you will see today only, anger not, worry not, with thankfulness, work diligently, be kind to others. This is a Japanese, a translation from the Japanese precepts that were written, I believe, in Mikao Usui's calligraphy. And Hawayo Takata, in her what I would call transmitting the practice from Japanese language to English, and also from Japanese culture to English, gave us these precepts. Just for today, do not worry. Just for today, do not anger. Honor your parents, teachers, and elders. Earn your living honestly. Show gratitude to every living thing. She also would talk, when she talked about the precepts, about be kind to others, count your many blessings. And these were the ones, these 5 were the ones that I and a group of masters who were initiated by her adopted as our 5 precepts. So you will see that honor your parents, teachers, and elders does not appear really in the Japanese, although this phrase, with thankfulness, is very close. If you can imagine that as a Japanese child, you are taught to honor your parents and your teachers and your elders, especially your parents from the very beginning, and to be thankful for them for giving you life, to be thankful for giving you life. This is so important in the Japanese culture. And I feel like there's a very strong connection between the two, except that in Japan, of course, honor your parents, teachers, and elders. They sometimes look at me and wonder, well, why is that in there? Because that's just something that they're raised with, that they're born with. So here we have the first translation. Now, the interesting thing also that I bring back in some of my conversations in Japan is that there is a process for embodied practices, which is a phrase that I love about Reiki. It means much more than we experience in our body what Reiki is. We experience in our body the changes of energy and so on. Embodiment means to become, like on all these different levels, to become the practice. Not just practice the practice, to become the practice. And excuse me, I just have to reach for something. And in this practice, there is a way of teaching that has been adopted in the Japanese culture called So-Ha-Rei. And it's the three stages of studentship. And I think most of us have watched the movie, oh no, The Karate Kid. Sorry, I had a little mind blank there. The Karate Kid. And, you know, he goes to learn karate, and the master is having him polish the car. Remember? Wax on, wax off, wax on, wax off. That's show. So you live with your master, you do everything he asks, and usually they are very daily chore thing kind of things. And you live with the master, and you by osmosis start to accept the practice into your body, into your mind and heart. And then as the practice, so after many years, you would move into Ha, which is the stage where you practice the practice and you don't ask any questions, which was very true about students of Hawayo Takata. She was not happy with questions. And she would always say, let Reiki teach you. Pay attention. to my hands, to what I say. And so you have this stage of, again, many years where you practice the practice and it becomes a part of you, but is like a coat that you put on at the beginning, and then slowly, 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 it becomes who you are. And Ray is the stage where you are the practice, and in that process of embodying the practice and the teachings of the master, you are able then to ask questions from the essence of the practice, not from your head. Two very different places. And out of this place of Ray, a master can present new wording or sometimes other ways of expressing the practice that come from the essence of the practice. So the essence is not changed. So I believe that Hawayo Takata, when she came from wanting to transmit the practice into English and into another culture, that she was in this place of Ray. And so she transmitted this, and we received the energetic of what the Japanese precepts have as well. So this is one of my processes that I entered into in my re-entry into into Arizona, into my life here, and that's why I wasn't with you in the last webinar, because I was sleeping, integrating. So I feel very grateful that we are doing this particular topic today. Now, out of this translation on the right in the blue, this has been translated into many, many languages and also into other English. So you can see that the syntax, or the way that Japanese is translated sort of verbatim, like without making complete sentences, is very similar to the syntax, just for today, do not worry. It doesn't say, I won't be worried, I won't cause worry, I don't worry. It says, just for today, do not worry. What does that mean? That's our first good question. Rachel, you can take the slide off now. I have a little story, one more story about translation. The young man, well, he was a young man when this happened some years ago. He was the first person to translate the precepts into Russian. And a few years later, I was in Russia having a gathering, and he looked at the translation and he said, oh, I have to translate this again because it's inaccurate. And then again, because it was so inaccurate. And then again, and one of the things that was wonderful for me was that I saw that as he grew in his understanding of the practice, as he embodied the practice more, he understood how he could convey from this maybe energy of Ray, growing energy of Ray, his understanding of the precepts, and then to be able to translate it into another language, his mother tongue. And I believe that this process goes on and on. So there is, at the same time, there was this argument in Germany about who had the right translation. And again, I kept saying to people. It depends on what level you are in your practice, how you receive them, how you use them, and how much they affect your life. So I feel like that's true for all of us. What was the second question, Rachel? I've forgotten it right now.
The second question was,
Treatment.
do you feel that the precept should be utilized within treatments? And if yes, how so?
Well, I have a feeling that you don't mean, should I remember them in case something happens in the treatment that I worry about, or that something's making me angry. I think you might be speaking about, like, do you use them like as affirmations or something like that? And I would say, I know I don't do that. And sometimes when I'm treating someone, I have the urge to share the precepts with that person, especially if they're not a Reiki person already. So I would say not as a part of a treatment, but in truth, I never thought about it. So I maybe have to think about that a little bit as well. So there are things that it can apply to myself as I treat. It can apply to what I share with the person as far as follow-up to the treatment. And but I don't know about actually using them in treatment. Okay, thanks. Next question.
Yes, I was muted and unable to get to my control. And I'll show my own face as I read this. The next question came from Sophie. And Sophie said, I practice constantly Reiki, but most difficult part for me is to feel and apply the first two precepts, mostly not to worry or anger.
Great.
And that was her statement.
Right. Thank you. Well, this is a great way to invite the precepts into your life. And, you know, it is not about making the precepts, the purpose of the precepts is not about making us perfect people. Like worrying doesn't mean you're not perfect. I mean, it might be a totally appropriate thing to do in that moment, is to go, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? Well, great question. Because it invites creativity. When you're angry, maybe there's a part of you that was hurt, or you feel helpless. I mean, really human kinds of emotions, and things that it's really often turns into anger, helplessness, and hurt. So when we feel that, we have an opportunity to go inside, rather than, like, when it says, just for today, do not anger. I think, what? Okay. It's like another way of saying the only place you have choice about, the only place that can change is inside of you. So how are you going to not be angry? And I have to say that sometimes I just love a good righteous anger, where I'm so angry. Like my last one was yesterday. Um, we don't have cable TV, and so I don't have an easy way to watch the Olympics and the Olympic Games. And I wanted to watch the opening ceremonies. And somehow our streaming thing didn't work. There was nothing I could do. I just had a fit. And finally, after having a fit, felt so good and so exciting. I just thought, okay, um, you're not watching the opening, you're not watching the opening ceremony. So here I go. I'm off. So I got over it, and not because I stomped around the house, but because I just thought, okay, so there's another something that I can do, and this gives me time to do it. And I went on with getting my new printer hooked up. I got to print what I really needed to do, and I worked until 9 o'clock last night and had a great time. So it's about being conscious about your worry, about being conscious about your anger. And also, I felt bad, of course, because I had a little bit of my fit on the phone with my partner. So I put her in a bad mood. So then I had to call and apologize to her. So if I would say it as a commandment, I would say I broke the commandment of just for today, do not anger. I had anger in myself. I created worry in my partner and put out bad vibes, into the universe. All true. Yeah. And, I didn't carry it around with me for more than 10 minutes. I didn't, I figured out what I needed to do and I let it go. And, part of the practice of Reiki is let it go. Because in the moment where you see something is just so, that there's nothing you can do about it, this is just how it is in the world today, right now, then poof, you can just let it go and be able to come back to yourself and choose something else to do, literally. Thank you. Thanks, Rachel. You are okay. No, I don't. I understand, and I don't know if this is true, that there is a YouTube video that has this on it. And I was going to actually look before we were on the air, and I forgot. So if somebody wants to look that up on YouTube. But yeah, that's great. No. Yes. Yes. Rachel, are you there? Hello. Okay, while Rachel is coming back, um, there's a number of questions about where do the precepts come from. And in truth, I don't know. I mean, I've had a lot of people who are researchers talk to me about where these precepts came from. The wonderful story that I liked, which now is a question mark, is that the Emperor Meiji, the emperor in Japan is a deity. He's born from gods, from uh, nature spirits. So he's not actually a human being. And so in the old days, he couldn't be seen by the ordinary people. So the Emperor Meiji really wanted to have contact with the people of Japan, and he wrote poems. They're a very special kind of poems that I don't remember the name of. Not haiku, another kind of poem. And I understood that this came from the Dying Injunction. So a poem that was meant to tell the Japanese people, like, I'm dying, but for the rest of your life, remember this, and it will create happiness and good fortune in your life. And that's where the 5 precepts came, which is a great story. And I understand that this was a misinterpretation, or there is other research, and there's some understanding that in Japan, that Mikao Usui was influenced by a movement that came before he sat on the mountain and received the gift of energy. So, I don't know where the precepts came from. I do know that they apply to our practice, and they have enhanced our practice enormously. And when people say, well, this is just an experiential practice, there's nothing for my mind to do, then I know that they haven't really delved into the precepts, because this is totally about changing the context of your thinking and of your belief system about what's possible. So Rachel's back. What's next, dear?
I never actually left, so that was very fascinating.
Yeah.
And Kate shared a link to a YouTube video with Yakuten Sensei speaking the precepts in Japanese. So I'll go ahead and add that to the email that those of you who are with us live will receive in about 12 hours with the replay to this. So you'll have that linked. And I'll also put it in the description of the YouTube video if you are watching us sometime in the future.
Right.
So enjoy that after this webinar. The next question, did you read Tracy's question?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So
I answered a question about where did the precepts come from, because it was in the chat, and
okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Tracy wrote in advance, do you say the Reiki precepts every day as a form of gratitude?
No, I don't. I don't personally. I know that there are many people who have taken up, well, I know many people who have done this, sometimes because they've heard that it is a Japanese practice in some of the Japanese Reiki dojos, so to speak. And That has not been my experience, so I haven't done it for myself. And there, years ago, like now, maybe 20 years ago or 25 years ago, somebody who's on the chat, on the webinar from the Netherlands, maybe will remember when the precepts were put to music. That was huge, you know, and we would sing the precepts and sing them several times in a row, and it's very lovely. And I always had this feeling of, you know, Hawaii Takata, my master, and would she approve, and so on. I don't know if she would approve, but actually it was a really lovely way to allow the precepts to somehow enter the space of Reiki in a group, and to be able to be spoken out loud without it having this feeling of some kind of pseudo Buddhism or pseudo um, chanting, that kind of thing. It was our own expression, and for me, that was my process of coming to terms with that. You know, to being open to that, because I was very. This is the way I was taught, and this is the way we're going to do it, and that's it. So that's why this talk that I had in the taxi with Yakuten-san really allowed me to think that if I recited them in English, that it would make a difference, because I don't consider English to be a kind of melodic, you know, kind of spiritual language. And what I realize is I have to, in my allowing myself to put my spiritual energy into the precepts in English, then it allows English to become a part of my spiritual practice. So I don't revert to Japanese because it sounds cool or it's authentic. And that's really important for me. It isn't that it's bad to learn the Japanese precepts and the way that they speak them in Japanese, and to recite them in Japanese. I think that's I haven't ever done that, so I would, you know, like to have the experience. But I just want to remind us that what we are given is not to be changed, but to be developed, so that we can arrive at Ray, the Shoha Ray, that we can use this time of Ha, which is our practice, which is where we are now, most of us, and to allow just so, like if you speak English, it's English. If it's Dutch, it's Dutch. If it's Russian, it's Russian. And there's something really special about being able to say these in your mother tongue. And when we have a circle of international people, it's so beautiful to hear them in these different languages, because each language has their own vibration. So I'm into transforming my own belief system about English, and I invite you to join me. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question was from Jess, and Jess wrote, "What tools do you use or recommend to remind you to live by the precepts?"
I think that the most appropriate tool, if we can call it a tool, is our self-treatment. Because in hopes that we treat ourselves every day, remembering that we have Reiki in our lives. And that reminds me that if I have Reiki in my life, that I also have the precepts in my life. And the purpose of the precepts is to allow myself to be happy, to allow myself to live a peaceful life, to allow myself to be natural, to be a natural human being. And this is a very beautiful thing. So I just learned a little thing that I'd like to share with you about the difference between tools and instruments. I've always called, like, for instance, a precept a sacred tool. And in some way, that's true. I think about a tool like a chisel. But a tool is mostly used on a kind of very physical surface, uh, and 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 is used to. This is totally general, and is used to, like, fix things or put things together. There's a mechanical object to using a tool, whereas an instrument is something that can transform what's happening. So when you use wood chisels on a piece of wood, and it's a sacred instrument that allows the sculpture to create something that has uh, another life, if you will, and that's what instruments are. So I really like the word instrument. Now, this is a new thing that I'm into. So, just a little side note. Thanks.
Thanks. The next question is from Lori. And
Uh-huh.
Lori wrote, I have a question about anger. It seems to be much more prevalent and expressed more in these times. Personally, when I find myself angry, I try to become aware of it and then release its tension from my body and let compassion release it from my mind. But the precepts say, do not anger. This is very different from dealing with anger. How does one become unresponsive to anger before it arises? Or does do not anger mean the expression of anger?
Well, in my 40 years of living with this particular phrase, um, I I see it as meaning anything to do with anger. So for me, sometimes just for today, do not anger means drive courteously. Drive as though we are all one.
Mm.
Don't cut somebody off and create a person having an angry response. Um, Sometimes it means for me, sometimes anger can be an easy place to go. Like, I read something like about the wall that our dear President Trump would like to build between the United States and Mexico. And I find this to be ridiculous on some level. And it's really easy to go to anger because I live with the wall that's about 40 miles from my house. And it's the wall between the United States and Mexico. So here we already have it and have had it for years. And has it stopped the flow of immigrants? No, because those people are coming not because they want to partake of the riches of the United States, but because they are desperate, so desperate that they are willing to climb a wall that no person should have to climb. And it hurts me. It hurts me to think that somebody who's a spokesperson for me is saying, you're a bad person. You can't come to the United States. You cause too many problems. So anger is a great cover-up. It's a great place to go because it's so cool, you know, and you don't have to be connected to Mr. Trump. You can be angry with him and not ask the question, well, where does he come from? You know, what makes him so afraid? What does he gain from it being so afraid? And can I make a difference in that fear? You know, because it's coming totally from a survival place. I don't get it. And excuse me, maybe to raise. So the only thing I know to do is to raise my level of conversation from, well, I'm going to not vote for Trump next year or in the next election because he's such an idiot, blah, blah, blah. Well, you know, I could go there, and I do sometimes. But, you know, I really want to understand who he represents in me. What is it in me that calls this out so clearly right now? And can I bring to this understanding, compassion, kindness, honor, gratitude? There's an old saying that adversity is the greatest ally of a spiritual practice. And I could be facetious, kind of, and say, well, then the United States is going to become a very spiritual country. But, you know, it was also true for the other half of people that felt the same way about Obama as a president. And now we get to experience that. That's another advantage right now for this. To understanding, yes, our fellow Americans. And to be able to understand, you know, the whole of the population around the world. This is not just America. So anger is really a thought-provoking emotion. And we have a lot to be angry about because there's a helplessness as well. Like, what could I do? You know, what can I do? As an individual, I just can try to be as peaceful as possible with my life. And that don't let it be in your life because it's easy. Let it be in your life because it's calling attention to something that you need to look at in your life. And if it's a community thing, that the community needs to look in their lives, because it's touching us. Anger is the emotion for survival. It's our emotion that allows us to survive physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And right now, for a lot of us, it's coming to us on all our different levels of being, of existence. And we need to go to the place where there's something else, not the dream up in the clouds, but what would happen if I heard something on the news that would provoke me into anger, and all of a sudden it provoked me into thoughtfulness? It's an amazing difference. And you will teach your children and the person who's sitting next to you watching the same news something different, to react in a different way. And we need to, as a human race, learn how to react in a different way. Great.
Thank you for that. I really appreciated your vulnerability, and you're really bringing it home. And it looks like many other people did, as their comments in the chat poured in. The next question is from Svetlana. And Svetlana wrote, there are moments when you get angry. I'd like to know how you spar around with this and what you do when you even lose your temper. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to reveal something about myself that is very personal. When I get angry, I love slamming doors. It's so satisfying. You know, we used to have great doors in our house because they were made out of wood, right? Like solid wood. So, you know, if you slammed a door, number one, it was heavy enough that you really had to put some energy into it. And the sound was like echoed through the house, and boom, and everybody knew you were angry, right? It's a great form of communication. However, the unfortunate part for me about my house here in Green Valley is that the doors are no longer made out of wood. They're hollow and they don't slam. I mean, there's no satisfaction in slamming a door like this. And and some of our doors are sliding doors. So, you know, I would really have a hard time in Japan if I were in this slamming door phase of my life, because almost all of their doors slide, right? Sorry. That's the fun part. And maybe you have a slamming door, you know, reaction in your anger. But over the years, and I have to say, this totally is about Reiki for me. I have changed from slamming doors, screaming at people without stop, and really pushing everybody away, because that's what I wanted, was to be left alone, because I was hurt. And I absolutely didn't want anybody else around who would hurt me more. That was my theory. And so what's important when you get angry is to go inside and find out, well, what's really going on? What really is your message? And after all this, there is also natural anger. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, this morning, for instance, I found out that two very dear friends of mine are in hospitals, and they're dying. They're going into transition, as we say. They're moving from this realm and plane of existence to another. And it was very sad for me. And part of the grieving process is anger. It's like, why can't, you know, if I just had done this, or if they just had done that, or why are you leaving me, or why do I have to live with this loss, or what am I going to do now? You know, all these questions. The anger brings up these questions for us to answer. That's the point. That's what I call natural anger. It's also allows us to survive. And you know, I'm more concerned now, I think, for myself on an emotional and spiritual level than on a physical level. I think I don't put myself into situations very much these days where I'm physically threatened, you know, because I drive more carefully, et cetera, et cetera. But these two men who are leaving our lives on this plane, I'm going to miss them. And it's important for me to stay genuine, to stay authentic, and to stay with the hurt and the sadness, than to again flow into this heart of righteous anger and just hide my feelings. And I think that uh, it's important to know that the precepts are not saying be perfect. Again, like, don't be angry ever. Oh, that's not possible. Don't be worried ever. Oh, it's not possible. Don't dishonor your parents. Well, it's not possible. We do it naturally. But is it our intention? Is it our motivation? Or can we have gratitude? And does it come from gratitude? You know, I just watched the movie Avatar a couple of nights ago with a dear friend of mine from Green Valley with 3D glasses. It was wild. And it was the first time I had watched Avatar from the time that I watched it in the movie theater, this is my second time. And I was always puzzled by the amount of violence in this movie. And what I understood is that there's violence that comes from hate and separation and has the intention to separate not only the oneness that we know we are, but the oneness inside of ourselves, that we have to separate. I mean, people who shoot somebody else, for instance, there's a part where they do go insane, whatever that means, because they're separated by anger or by hurt or by fear. They're separated from their oneness. And so they can kill another person. I have that. I could do that if I nurtured the separation. But now my life is about nurturing the connectedness. And that was the two things that were shown in this movie: connectedness, separation. And there's violence on both sides. So this is some really beautiful places that we're going to. And it all comes about these little phrases. Just for today, do not anger. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. I'm looking at our time. Would you like me to go on with the next question and perhaps next two?
One more.
Okay. So the final question for today came from Margot. And Margot wrote, what helps to ground the higher life force energy, feels overwhelming sometimes, and adjust to this new mystic world while still needing to function in the material world?
Wow. uh, let's see. This is a challenging one. Um, the phrase grounding oneself, or how can I ground, or there are people ask me these questions a lot, and I don't really know what that means. So I'll take a guess. Um, it means, how can I live in my daily life with this question? I don't know. What do you think that means, Rachel? To
How
ground?
about um hmm, let me reread the question.
Good
So
idea.
I have an idea. So what helps to ground the higher life force energy? Um, and adjust to this new mystic world while still needing to function in material world. What comes to me is the idea that Reiki is downward flowing energy. So how do I ground that? What the question is reminding me is of when I first began practicing Reiki, and it felt very intense, almost uncomfortable, of realizing that Reiki exists and that it's something in me that I have just made a commitment to build a relationship with. That it felt like this outside thing that's actually separate from the mundane, from the life I live in the material. It felt like there's this separate part of my consciousness that I'm just awakening to,
Uh-huh.
and in my experience, that separation, it's, or what I would say, like grounding down this level of consciousness, um, it just feels more natural the more that I practice and give myself Reiki on a consistent basis, that it
Uh-huh.
doesn't feel like a separate outside um, mystic thing, even though I get that it is
Uh-huh.
mystic, not
Uh-huh.
outside. Yeah.
Right. Well, uh, thanks. That helps me, because my short answer is Reiki, as in self-treatment, treatment of others, uh, living the precepts. So living the precepts is really about paying attention to your own uh, decisions and how you respond to something, how how you say, oh well, uh, I had a good day because of this, and I had a bad day because of that. That's separation. So what about, be grateful for every living thing? Be grateful for everything that happens. I had a great day, and these are the things that happened that I liked, and these are the things that happened that I didn't like, or these are the things I found challenging, and these are the things that soothed me. It's really important to start in the very, subtleties of our language, and I really appreciate this. So. Um, the process of, you know, going what I would call from the relative world to the absolute of just so, and the mystic, which is about oneness, and it's about um, things just being. There are no explanations, and a lot of times they seem very magical, and just coming out of the sky, something happens, right? So all of these things are a part of our life, as well as the things that we don't like. And it's really important to be able to uh, be able to live with them in equanimity. And so I hope that I've given you some homework uh, for the next few weeks until we meet again. And if you have more questions, check the Facebook page. I'm really wanting to catch up with the questions that have not been answered yet, and I'm hoping to do that in the next few days. I just wanted to also, I don't know if you can read this bumper sticker. I don't put bumper stickers on my car, but I loved this bumper sticker, and maybe it applies for today's show. Don't believe everything that you think.
I saw some comments of appreciation in the chat about your sticker.
Right. Well, I didn't know my wall was going to be exposed, so another exposure. So it's important for me to remember that. Don't believe everything I think, because there are some pretty questionable things in there. So anyway, this is the end of our show, my part of the show for today. Thank you very much for all your questions and for everything that's happened today, because it brings me to you in a different way. And so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So before we close with Reiki, I just have a couple of announcements, which are about opportunities for you to engage more directly in community, following up on the webinar that I led last month, talking about a future of Reiki community where we're actually working collaboratively and in a really connected way that is in support of what we're all doing together. And also, I was upfront that I don't know exactly how we're going to do that or achieve that. But there is a global Reiki gathering, the second one that we're doing, that I'll have registration open for very soon. The dates, if you'd like to save the date, if you're feeling a desire within yourself to come together in person with global community, the dates for the 2018 gathering are June 20th to 24th in Michigan, USA. And the registration for that will be open very soon. However, there is an opportunity much sooner to connect. And the idea actually came in conversation with a woman named Karen Rittinger, who Phyllis and I met at the Global Reiki Gathering last year. And the idea is to have just people from this global community that have been gathering on these webinars to do meet and greets. So I will be facilitating the first one next Sunday, February 17th, or next Saturday, excuse me, a week from today at noon Chicago time. And right now, I just posted a link. If you're on live, you can click to register. There's no charge for it, but we'll be using a different virtual platform called Zoom, where we all share our screen and can actually talk and have conversation. And so for the first online Reiki community meet and greet, we'll just be introducing ourselves and sharing our Reiki stories. So I want to meet you, and I imagine you want to meet some other folks who likely have some shared experience despite a wide distance between us. And because it is an in-person exchange, the space for that one is limited. Like for a webinar like this, right now we have over 100 people on live. But for this, it's going to be more intimate. So those of you who are with us live today will have the first opportunity to sign up and get the spot to participate in that experience. So go ahead and click and read a little bit more about what we're doing and fill out the form, and I'll be in touch. So let's now place our hands on ourselves, or if it's in your practice to send distance Reiki, use your practice for doing that. And I invite you to send Reiki to our collective highest purpose. And let's just commence a few minutes of Reiki, feeling the connection that we've been in with each other over the last 90 minutes, and feeling it and soaking it up for ourselves, and what we will do when we go forward. When we're on these webinars experiencing Reiki, I feel what I imagine to be the Reiki and the presence of you, all of you, with me in the moment as I speak these words, and also far into the future. Thank you for being here wherever you are in space and time. You're felt and appreciated. Until next time, peace, love, and Reiki. Bye.